It was my 3rd year of marriage when my widowed sister, Sarah, came to me with a bizarre request. She wanted to borrow my husband's seed. I flat out refused. My mom acted like I was betraying her blood. Mark, my husband, called me a fake sister. Even my 6-year-old, Timmy, whined, calling me heartless. That night, I walked Mark to Sarah's room myself. The whole family was beaming, praising my selflessness. I just smiled. I've always been generous with things I'm about to throw away. Dawn hadn't even cracked when Mark crept back into our room. He tiptoed to my side of the bed, reaching for me. I recoiled. Don't touch me. My eyes snapped open, disgust plain on my face. Mark jumped, forcing a sheepish smile. Honey, you weren't asleep? Nope. I nodded, my gaze drawn to his neck. The bright red hickeys were a vulgar reminder that the man next to me was tainted. I frowned. Why are you back so early? Mark's face hardened. Come on, babe, you know why? We're married. Where else would I go? I scoffed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Married? Last I checked, you and Sarah are practically married now. Mark's expression soured. Janice, you're the one who agreed to this borrowing seed thing. Why are you being a bitch? My chest tightened. I hadn't agreed. Not at first. But how could I stand against the entire family? Mom threatened to disown me, heaping guilt. Sarah staged a sob fest outside my office daily. Timmy vowed to skip school unless I gave in. And Mark? He froze my assets. I couldn't even afford ramen. What choice did I have? I stared him down. He softened, sensing my anger. Listen, Jan, I love you. Always will. And I promise, once Sarah's pregnant, I won't touch her again. I turned away, done with the conversation. But Mark pulled me close from behind. Honest to God, you need to take care of yourself. Sarah's older than you by 8 years, and she doesn't have an ounce of extra fat. My stomach churned. He actually had the nerve to say that? I tried to pull away, but he tightened his grip. His hands roamed freely over me. Miss me last night, babe? He pressed close, his breath hot on my ear. I couldn't stand another second. Then a knock at the door. Mark, Sarah's not feeling well. Could you check on her? Mom's voice. Mark froze, looking at me hesitant. Janice, I pushed him up. Go on, honey. Sarah's always been delicate. If she feels bad, take her to the ER. Mark grinned. That's my girl. You're so kind, January. He pecked my cheek and left. I scrubbed at the spot he kissed, disgusted. Mom, still lingering in the doorway, sighed. Janice, don't be mad at Sarah. Family shares. Always. Besides, it's better Mark's with her than chasing after some bimbo. I laughed, a hollow sound. Don't worry, Mom. I'm not jealous. After all, I wasn't planning on keeping any of this. When Mom left, I grabbed my ID and raced to the DMV. I expedited my passport and consulted a lawyer on divorce papers. Then I stocked up on hidden cameras and hurried home. Where were you, Janice? Mark greeted me with a snarl. Nowhere. I moved towards our bedroom. He grabbed my arm. Janice, do you know what time it is? Just because you're throwing a fit doesn't mean you can skip making lunch. Yeah, Jan. Sarah chimed in. I know you hate me, but don't neglect Timmy. He's just a kid. Skipping meals will stunt his growth. I frowned. If you're so concerned, why haven't you made lunch? Well. Sarah looked stricken. Mark glared at me. Lay off, Sarah. You always make lunch. Don't forget, you're a homemaker. A bitter smile twisted my lips. I'd quit my job the day I married Mark. I managed everything at home. Cooking, cleaning. I sacrificed my life for this family, for them. And what did it get me? Betrayal. Maybe they never considered me family at all. I swallowed my sadness and headed to the kitchen. Sarah isn't feeling well. Make her chicken soup. Mark ordered. You're so sweet, Mark. Sarah gushed, flashing a smug look. As I cooked, Mom wandered in. I raised an eyebrow. She never set foot in the kitchen. Said it ruined her skin. Something up? I asked. Janice, you were out of line today. Mom looked serious. I was stunned. She went on. You know Sarah's spoiled. Why weren't you on time with lunch? Just because of this seed thing, you're going to neglect her? Seriously, grow up. My chest tightened. I'd always known she favored Sarah, but hearing it still hurt. Whatever I did, it was never as good as Sarah. Sarah could be useless, but if I slacked off even a little, Mom would scream at me. Why? Tears welled. Mom, am I even your daughter? Why do you treat us so differently? You have no right to compare yourself to Sarah. Mom snapped. Sarah came to bring blessings. I barely pushed her out. You're a curse. You know I almost died giving birth to you? Massive hemorrhaging on the operating table. How can you expect me to treat you the same? I stood there, dumbstruck. That's why she hated me? It was pathetic. I said coldly, if that's all, get out. What an attitude. Mom bristled. I'm telling you this for your own good. Sarah's your sister, Mark's your husband, your family. Don't make it so difficult over something small. I ignored her and headed to my bedroom. Just as I reached the door, I heard Sarah's voice, sweet and seductive. Mark, please give it to me. I can't. What if Janice comes back? Mark whispered. She's cooking. She won't. Mark, I want you so bad. All right, you little vixen. My blood turned to ice. I thought Mark had at least a little love for me. Apparently, I was wrong. He didn't care about my feelings or dignity. He was doing that with Sarah in our bedroom. I eased the door open a crack. The sight of their bodies intertwined made my stomach churn. Mark, you're so good. Sarah moaned. Tell me, who do you like better? Me or Janice? You, of course, baby. Your sister's like a dead fish in bed. You're way more fun. Tears streamed down my face. How could they humiliate me like this? The sounds of their bodies slamming together clenched my heart. I hurt so much. They finished, and my feelings for everyone in this family died. I quietly shut the door. Then I planted hidden cameras in Sarah's bedroom, the living room, everywhere. When I was done, I set the table. This is it. Mark frowned at the meager meal. So I'll do better. He shrugged it off and poured Sarah a bowl of chicken soup. For strength. He winked at Sarah, who blushed. I ate silently, numb. Timmy piped up. Aunt Sarah, can you come to my parent-teacher conference tomorrow? I don't know. Sarah glanced at me. Why not? Timmy pouted. Mom always dresses like a slob. Everyone calls her a frumpy hag. Okay, I'll go. Sarah said, then looking at me. Janice, you don't mind, right? I started to answer, but Timmy burst into tears. I don't want Mom to go. Why can't you be my mom? Mom's ugly. I hate her. My rage exploded. What had my sacrifices been for? Fine. Let them all suffer. I shot to my feet, grabbed the edge of the table and flipped it. The porcelain shattered against the hardwood floor with a sound like a gunshot. Scalding chicken broth splashed across Mark's polished leather shoes. A greasy chicken wing slapped squarely against the front of Sarah's cream-colored cashmere sweater before dropping into the puddle of soup at her feet. For 3 seconds, the room was dead silent. Even the refrigerator's low hum seemed to cut out, smothered by the sheer shock of what I had just done. In 8 years of marriage, I had never so much as slammed a door. I had been the family shock absorber, the damp sponge that soaked up every insult, every demand, every drop of contempt until I was heavy with their rot. Timmy's mouth hung open, a fleck of rice stuck to his bottom lip. Then he let out a piercing, hysterical wail, lunging backward into Sarah's lap. Aunt Sarah. Mommy went crazy. She tried to burn me. Janice. Mark roared, shooting to his feet so fast his dining chair tipped backward and crashed into the sideboard. Are you out of your goddamn mind? Sarah gasped, dramatically clutching her chest with one manicured hand while wrapping the other around Timmy. My sweater. Mark, this was a gift from my late husband. And Timmy, she almost hit your son with boiling soup. She's unhinged. Mom scrambled over from the hallway, her face twisted in pure, unadulterated fury. She didn't check on me. She didn't ask what caused the snap. Her hand swung out in a wide, vicious arc aimed straight for my cheek. I caught her wrist in midair. Mom froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. Her bones felt brittle beneath my grip, thin, hollow, fragile. For decades, this woman had held absolute power over my psyche simply by holding her breath, withholding her affection, and reminding me that I was a biological mistake who had torn her womb on the way out. Don't, I whispered. My voice wasn't loud. It wasn't shaking. It was flat, cold, and dead, like water beneath a frozen lake. Don't you ever raise your hand to me again. You ungrateful little monster. Mom hissed, trying to pull away, but I held her tight enough to whiten her knuckles before shoving her back onto the sofa. Look at what you did. Look at this mess. You ruin everything you touch. Sarah came here to heal, to find hope, and you treat her like an enemy. She's not an enemy, Mom, I said, looking down at the spilled broth, the scattered rice, the broken ceramic shards reflecting the warm chandelier light. She's just a thief. And Mark is just a stray dog. You can have both of them. Mark stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides, his chest heaving under his dress shirt. What the hell did you just say to me? You heard me. I met his gaze squarely. The table is cleared. If you're still hungry, Sarah can cook. After all, she doesn't have an ounce of extra fat on her. I'm sure she knows plenty of recipes for keeping a man satisfied. Mark's face flushed an ugly mottled crimson. For a second, a flash of panic crossed his eyes, wondering how much I knew, how much I had heard outside the bedroom door. But his arrogance quickly swallowed it whole. You're acting like a psychotic bitch, Mark snarled, lowering his voice into that patronizing baritone he always used when he wanted to put me in my place. You're stressed. You're insecure because Sarah is here. Go to the guest room and cool off. Tomorrow morning, you're apologizing to your mother, you're apologizing to Sarah, and you're buying Timmy whatever toy he wants to make up For terrifying him. Yeah. Timmy shrieked from Sarah's arms, his face buried in her ruined sweater. I want the big Lego set. And I don't want you to sleep in Daddy's room anymore. Aunt Sarah should sleep there. Sarah stroked the boy's hair, casting a sly, pitying glance up at me from under her eyelashes. Janice, don't be so dramatic. We're all family. Let's just put this behind us. Go wash your face. I'll help Mark clean up. I didn't answer. I didn't yell. I simply stepped over the broken porcelain, walked down the hallway into the master bedroom, and locked the heavy wooden door behind me. Behind the locked door, the muffled sounds of their righteous indignation filtered through. Mark complaining about the ruined hardwood, Mom fussing over Sarah's clothes, Sarah cooing over Timmy. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The hidden camera app was active. All 4 camera feeds, the master bedroom, Sarah's guest room, the living room, and the dining room, were streaming in crisp, high-definition 1080p directly to a private cloud server I had set up, using an anonymous Proton Mail account. I opened the folder labeled Evidence. Day 1. There they were. Mark and Sarah, rolling across my white Egyptian cotton sheets. Sarah's high-pitched giggles. Mark's breathless whispers calling me a dead fish. Every frame was time-stamped, every word captured with crystal clear audio. I sat down at the edge of the bed, feeling the cool silk under my fingers, and dialed a number I had memorized 6 hours ago. Victoria Vance's office. A crisp, professional voice answered on the second ring. Victoria, I said, staring at the camera feed on my screen where Mark was currently wrapping an arm around Sarah's waist as they threw paper towels over the broth. This is Janice. Send me the retainer agreement. I want him left with nothing but his skin. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. Usually by 6:30 a.m., the kitchen was alive with the sound of sizzling bacon, the whistle of the kettle, and the clatter of lunchboxes being packed. I would have Timmy's uniform ironed, his backpack organized, Mark's dry-cleaned suit laid out on the bed, and Mom's herbal tea steeping at precisely 80 degrees Celsius. Today, I stayed in bed until 8:15 a.m. I lay on my back, watching the dust motes drift in the morning sunlight, enjoying the profound, luxurious sensation of doing absolutely nothing. Outside my door, the chaos started around 7:15. First came the frantic stomping of feet, then the sound of drawers slamming in the hallway. Janice, where the hell are my blue cufflinks? Mark yelled, pounding on the locked door. I have a board meeting at 9. Janice, open this door. I didn't move. Mom. Mommy. Timmy's voice joined the chorus, whining and high-pitched. Where's my permission slip for the zoo trip? You didn't sign it. And my cereal isn't poured. Janice, stop this childish silent treatment. Mom's shrill voice cut through the wood. Your husband needs to go to work. Your son needs to go to school. Do you expect your poor sister to do everything? I reached over, picked up my noise-canceling headphones from the nightstand, slipped them over my ears, and played Chopin's Nocturnes at full volume. By the time I unlocked the door at 9 a.m., the house was a disaster zone. Empty cereal boxes lay discarded on the granite island. A carton of milk had been left open, slowly souring in the morning heat. Timmy's toys were scattered across the entryway, and a pile of dirty laundry had been dumped unceremoniously outside the laundry room door because no one knew which settings to use for delicate wool. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen island, wearing a silk robe that belonged to me, nursing a cup of black coffee. She looked exhausted, her hair unbrushed, dark circles under her eyes. When she saw me, her lips tightened into a thin, bitter line. You really think you're making a point, don't you? She said, setting her mug down with a sharp clatter. You made Mark late. He had to leave without his presentation files because you had them locked in your home office. He has hands, I said lightly, walking past her to the espresso machine. And you have a mouth. Between the two of you, I figured you could manage a bowl of cereal. You're a disgusting mother, Sarah sneered, leaning forward. Timmy was crying, his eyes out because his socks were damp. You're punishing an innocent child, just to get back at me. I turned, holding my fresh cup of coffee, and leaned against the counter. Sarah, I said softly, looking her up and down. You wanted the man. You wanted his seed. You wanted his house. You wanted his son to call you mommy. Well, congratulations. The trial period has officially begun. You're the woman of the house now. Why aren't you folding the laundry? Sarah's face went white. I am a guest in this house. Not according to the sounds coming from my bedroom yesterday afternoon. I replied, taking a slow sip. Guests usually keep their clothes on. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, where Mom was puttering around in the bathroom. You have no right to speak to me like that. Mark and I are doing this for the family. For bloodline continuity. My late husband died before we could have a baby. Your late husband died 5 years ago after filing for divorce because he caught you sleeping with his business partner, I said smoothly. Sarah froze as if struck by lightning. Did you really think I didn't read the probate records? I smiled, watching the terror bloom in her pupils. Mom hid it from the rest of the extended family to protect your precious reputation. But I have the court transcripts, Sarah. You've never been a grieving widow. You've just been an unemployed parasite, looking for your next host. You shut your filthy mouth, Sarah hissed, lunging out of her chair. Try me, I said, not moving an inch. Step 1 inch closer and I'll forward those transcripts to Mark's mother. Let's see how much the grand matriarch of the Miller family loves the idea of her son having a baby with a woman who drove her last husband into an early grave. Sarah stopped dead in her tracks, trembling with rage, her hands clenched so tightly her fake nails dug into her palms. Enjoy your coffee, sister, I said, walking toward the front door with my purse on my shoulder. I have an appointment. Victoria Vance's law office was located on the 42nd floor of the city's premier financial tower. Glass walls, polished concrete, and a view that made the entire city look like a collection of toy blocks. Victoria herself was 50, dressed in an immaculate charcoal pantsuit, with silver-streaked hair cut into a razor-sharp bob. She had a reputation in the state as the guillotine, the attorney high-net-worth men dreaded seeing on the opposing letterhead. She slid a thick folder across the mahogany desk toward me. Your instincts were correct, Janice, Victoria said, leaning back in her leather chair and steepled her fingers. Mark hasn't just been freezing your credit cards. Over the last 18 months, he has siphoned approximately $480,000 out of your joint marital estate. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face blank. Where did it go? A Shell LLC registered in Delaware under the name Golden Horizon Holdings, Victoria said, tapping the document with a manicured fingernail. And guess who is listed as the sole managing member of that LLC? Sarah, I whispered. Bingo. Victoria offered a predatory smile. He bought a luxury 2-bedroom condominium downtown 3 months ago, paid cash using the funds diverted from the commercial real estate portfolio you helped him acquire during your second year of marriage. The deed is in Sarah's name. A bitter, cold laugh escaped my chest. The borrowing seed story was never a sudden request, I realized aloud. They've been planning this for over a year. They wanted to get her pregnant, establish the baby as his legitimate heir, push me out under the guise of an amicable, faultless separation, and leave me with pennies while Sarah moved into a fully paid-off luxury condo with $500,000 of my money. Precisely, Victoria nodded. In this state, dissipation of marital assets during a period of infidelity carries severe statutory penalties. If we can prove fraudulent conveyance and intentional financial abandonment, the judge won't just award you 50% of the remaining estate. We can claw back the entire condominium, the diverted funds, and petition for sole ownership of the marital residence, plus punitive alimony. Can we take his company equity? I asked. Victoria's eyes gleamed. Mark's logistics firm is currently preparing for a Series B funding round with an institutional investment group, correct? Yes. They're announcing the lead investor at their annual gala next Friday. Then we have them by the throat, Victoria said, sliding a pen toward me. Sign these authorization forms. I will deploy a private forensic accounting team tonight. By Thursday, I will have every offshore account, every illicit wire transfer, and every hidden asset indexed into a forensic binder that would make the IRS weep. And the footage? I asked, placing my flash drive on the desk. Victoria picked up the drive, rolling it between her fingers. The footage is the nail in the coffin for the court of public opinion. Judges are human. Janice, when a man brings his mistress into the marital bed while his wife is cooking in the next room, and then conspires to rob her blind with her own mother's assistance, judicial sympathy dries up very, very fast. I signed my name on the dotted line. Janice Miller. One more thing, Victoria, I said, looking up. Yes? I want custody of Timmy. Waved. Victoria paused, her pen hovering in the air. For the first time, a flicker of surprise crossed her stoic face. You want to surrender custody? Usually, mothers fight tooth and nail. Timmy is 6 years old, I said, my voice steady though a deep old ache throbbed behind my ribs. For 6 years I bled for him. I gave up my career at an international design firm. I ruined my body. I spent endless nights in emergency rooms when he had croup while Mark was out entertaining clients. And yesterday, that child looked me in the eye, called me an ugly hag, and told me he wished Sarah was his mother. I leaned forward, looking out over the sprawling city beneath us. He doesn't love me, Victoria. He loves the comfort, the indulgence, and the illusion that Sarah represents. He has been weaponized by Mark and my mother. Since he could speak. If I take him, Mark will use him as a financial anchor to drag me into endless custody battles, parental alienation hearings, and child support disputes. I looked back at the attorney. Let Sarah have him. Let Mark have him. Let them find out what it's actually like to raise a spoiled, undisciplined child without a maid to clean up the vomit, do the homework, and absorb the tantrums. When they realize that children don't run on glamorous Instagram photos and sweet talk, they'll tear each other apart. Victoria looked at me for a long moment. Then slowly a look of profound, professional respect settled over her features. You're not just divorcing him, are you, Janice? No, I replied, standing up and buttoning my coat. I'm setting fire to the house and locking the doors from the outside. Over the next 4 days, I became a ghost in my own home. I didn't cook. I didn't clean. I didn't wash a single dish. I ordered gourmet room service style meals directly to my locked home office, dined in peace while reviewing my financial portfolios, and spent my afternoons at high-end spas, having my hair treated, my skin rejuvenated, and my wardrobe completely replaced. Meanwhile, the main house descended into absolute squalor. Without me to manage the domestic machinery, the cracks in their perfect family widened into chasms within 48 hours. On Tuesday evening, Sarah attempted to cook beef bourguignon to impress Mark. After work, she burned the fond, set off the smoke alarms, and ruined 2 of my Le Creuset Dutch ovens. Mark came home exhausted from pre-gala investor meetings to find the kitchen filled with acrid blue smoke, Timmy screaming on the floor because he wanted McDonald's, and Sarah sobbing over a greasy sink, complaining that the stove was defective. Why didn't you just order takeout? Mark yelled, ripping his tie off. I've been in meetings for 10 hours, Sarah. I just wanted a hot meal. I was trying to be a good partner to you. Sarah wailed, stamping her foot. You don't appreciate anything. Janice never had to deal with this kitchen. It's impossible to clean. Janice managed to feed 5 people every single night at 7 o'clock sharp, without burning down the neighborhood. Mark barked back before storming into the guest room and slamming the door. I watched the entire exchange on camera from my iPad, sipping a glass of 2018 Pinot Noir. On Wednesday, the disaster moved to Timmy's school. Sarah had insisted on attending the parent-teacher conference in my place, desperate to prove her superiority as a young, fashionable mother. She wore a skin-tight backless knit dress, 5-inch stiletto heels, and heavy evening makeup to an elementary school at 2 in the afternoon. The camera in Mark's car caught the aftermath. Mark was gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white. What the hell were you thinking, Sarah? Mrs. Higgins called me directly. She said you spent 20 minutes complaining about your late husband's trauma, instead of looking at Timmy's reading evaluation. She was condescending to me. Sarah shouted from the passenger seat, touching up her lip gloss in the vanity mirror. That frumpy old schoolteacher was judging my outfit. And Timmy's grades aren't my fault. Janice was supposed to be tutoring him every day. Well, Janice isn't doing it anymore. Mark yelled, slamming his hand on the dashboard. The teacher said Timmy is 2 reading levels behind. He hits other kids during recess, and he told his art teacher to shut up because she's ugly. Where did he learn that language? Sarah went quiet, looking out the window. In the back seat, Timmy was kicking the front passenger seat with his muddy sneakers over and over. I want ice cream. Aunt Sarah promised me ice cream. Daddy, make her buy me ice cream. Shut up, Timmy. Mark snapped. Timmy's eyes went wide. He had never been yelled at by his father before. He let out a shriek that rattled the car windows. I hate you. I want mommy. Where is mommy? Your mother is locking herself in her room like a crazy person. Mark roared back. Now sit back and shut your mouth. From my tablet, I paused the video, saved the clip into the cloud folder, and forwarded it directly to Victoria's team. Evidence. Irremediable breakdown of household stability. Thursday night was the turning point. It was 1:30 a.m. when the hidden camera in the master living room pinged my phone with a motion alert. I opened the feed. The living room was dark, illuminated only by the faint amber glow of the decorative floor lamp. Mark, Sarah, and Mom were sitting around the glass coffee table, whispering in hushed, conspiratorial tones. We have to do it tomorrow before the gala, Sarah was saying, leaning over a stack of legal forms. If she attends the gala with you, everyone will assume you're still happily married. If she makes a scene in front of the investors, the funding round will fall through. Mark rubbed his face with both hands. He looked terrible, haggard, bloodshot, eyes stubble lining his jaw. How do we get her out without the police getting involved? The deed to this house is in both our names. Mom leaned in, her voice dripping with venomous pragmatism. Simple, Mom whispered, tapping a document. I went to Dr. Albright's clinic yesterday. I told him Janice has been exhibiting severe manic depressive episodes, throwing boiling soup at children, destroying property, and locking herself in rooms for days without eating. He signed a preliminary psychiatric evaluation referral. My blood ran cold. My own mother, the woman who gave me life, was actively conspiring to have me involuntarily committed to a private mental health facility to strip me of my legal agency. Once we have her placed in the 72-hour observation hold, Mom continued with a chilling smile, Mark can file for emergency temporary conservatorship based on spousal necessity. You sign the asset transfers, remove her name from the house deed, finalize the Delaware property title, and by the time she gets out, she'll have nothing left to fight with. Will it hold up in court? Mark asked, his voice hesitant, but clearly tempted. Of course it will, Sarah purred, sliding her hand over Mark's thigh, leaning into his ear. My lawyer friend in Delaware reviewed the paperwork. As long as she's medically certified as unstable during the transition period, any challenge she files later will take years to litigate. By then, our baby will be born, the funding round will be closed, and she won't have the money to pay an attorney. Mark looked at Sarah, then looked down at the psychiatric commitment petition. All right, Mark muttered, picking up his pen and signing his name at the bottom. We call the transport service tomorrow at noon while I'm at the venue doing sound checks. Mom, you stay here to let the medics in. Don't worry, darling, Mom said, patting his hand. Sarah is the daughter who brings blessings to this family. Janice was always a thorn in our side. It's time we pulled it out. I sat in the darkness of my office, watching the three of them clink their whiskey glasses together on the screen in a silent, celebratory toast. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel grief. I felt a profound, crystalline clarity. The last microscopic shred of biological obligation. The final phantom ache of childhood yearning for a mother's love. All of it evaporated, leaving behind a cold, unyielding diamond of pure intent. I picked up the phone. Victoria, I said when the line connected. Janice? It's 2 a.m. What's wrong? They just signed a fraudulent involuntary psychiatric commitment petition for me, I said evenly. They're planning to have a transport team take me tomorrow at noon. Victoria's breath caught. Are you in immediate danger? No. My office door is solid oak with an electronic keypad deadbolt. But I want the process servers ready at 11:30 a.m. And I want the county sheriff's department notified of an attempted unlawful medical restraint. Consider it done. Victoria's voice turned into pure ice. And the gala? Tomorrow night? Oh, I wouldn't miss the gala for the world. I smiled into the dark. Make sure the media contacts you mentioned are seated near the main projection screen. Friday, 11:30 a.m. The sun was high in a cloudless autumn sky. Downstairs, I could hear Mom pacing the hallway, humming a cheerful church hymn, as she waited for the medical transport van to arrive. Sarah was in the guest room, trying on different designer dresses for the evening gala, blasting pop music through her Bluetooth speaker. At precisely 11:35 a.m., 3 vehicles pulled into our circular driveway. The first was a plain white medical transport van. The second was a marked county sheriff cruiser. The third was a sleek black Mercedes sedan bearing the law firm emblem of Vance and Partners. I walked out of my home office, dressed in a sharp, tailored ivory silk pantsuit, 3-inch designer heels, my hair styled in soft, elegant waves, wearing zero jewelry except for a thin, diamond tennis bracelet I had bought for myself 3 years ago. As I reached the top of the stairs, the front doorbell rang. Mom rushed to open it, her face arranged in an expression of tragic, sorrowful concern. Oh, thank goodness you're here. My poor daughter is upstairs. She's completely detached from reality. She's been violent. Ma'am, step aside. A deep, authoritative voice commanded. Uniformed Deputy Sheriff Miller and a second officer stepped past Mom into the foyer. Behind them walked Victoria Vance, carrying 2 thick leather briefcases, flanked by 2 certified private process servers in dark suits. Mom's smile faltered. Wait. Who are you? Where are the doctors? Mrs. Evelyn Carter? One of the process servers stepped forward, thrusting a thick legal packet into Mom's bewildered hands. You are hereby served with a temporary restraining order and a formal summons for criminal conspiracy to commit unlawful medical imprisonment under State Penal Code Section 236. Mom's jaw dropped. The papers trembled in her hands. What? This is a mistake. My son-in-law Mark. Sarah emerged from the guest room, wearing a glittering emerald gown, her makeup only half done. What's going on down here? Who let these people in? Sarah Carter, the second process server announced, stepping toward her and slapping an identical packet against her chest. You are formally served with a writ of fraudulent asset attachment, a notice of lease pendens regarding the real property at 442 Riverfront Boulevard, and a deposition subpoena for grand larceny and tax evasion. Sarah screamed, dropping the papers as if they were covered in acid. What is this garbage? Mark. Where is Mark? Mr. Miller is currently at the Grand Hyatt downtown, Victoria Vance announced, her voice echoing through the grand foyer with the authority of a judge handing down a sentence. And my associates are serving him on the convention floor as we speak. I walked down the grand staircase slowly, my heels clicking with rhythmic precision against the polished hardwood. Mom looked up at me, her eyes bulging in terror. Janice, what did you do? We are your family. How could you bring the police into this house? I stopped on the bottom step, looking down at her. You called me a curse when I was born, Mom, I said softly, looking straight into her faded eyes. You said I almost killed you on the operating table, and you've spent 34 years making me pay for the crime of breathing. Janice, the debt is settled, I said, stepping past her toward the open front door. Officers, you have the surveillance footage documenting the conspiracy signed at 1:30 a.m. last night. If either of these women attempts to remove a single piece of property from this house before 5 o'clock, arrest them for felony grand theft. Understood, Ms. Miller. Deputy Sheriff Miller replied, his hand resting firmly on his utility belt as he glared at Sarah. Sarah lunged toward me, her eyes wild, her fake eyelashes hanging loose from one eyelid. You bitch. You think you've won? Mark loves me. He's the CO. He has millions of dollars. You're just a discarded, barren housewife who's going to end up alone in a ditch. I paused at the threshold, turned around, and looked at her with pure, unadulterated amusement. Sarah, I said, letting out a soft laugh. Mark doesn't have millions. Mark has $32 million in venture debt, 3 frozen bank accounts, and an emergency board meeting starting in 5 hours. I flashed a radiant, merciless smile. See you at the gala, sister. The grand ballroom of the Grand Hyatt was the pinnacle of corporate luxury. Over 400 high-net-worth investors, venture capital partners, industry, journalists, and regional politicians were gathered under towering crystal chandeliers. Black-tie waiters glided through the crowd with silver trays of champagne and caviar canapes. At the center of the VIP reception area stood Mark Miller. He was wearing a custom midnight blue tuxedo, holding a glass of scotch, surrounded by 3 senior managing directors from Vanguard Capital, the lead private equity fund set to inject $20 million into his logistics firm. Tonight, Mark, my boy, Arthur Sterling, the senior partner at Vanguard, said, clapping Mark on the shoulder. Your growth metrics over the last 3 quarters are outstanding. But what truly sold our investment committee was your stability. In this market, we invest in men with strong foundations. Family men. Men who represent integrity. Mark beamed, his chest swelling with pride. Thank you, Arthur. My wife and I have always believed that integrity is the bedrock of any successful enterprise. She couldn't be here early tonight. She's a bit under the weather, but she sends her warmest regards to the committee. Actually, Arthur. A smooth, melodic voice rang out from behind them. I'm feeling much better. Mark's smile froze. The glass of scotch in his hand gave a sudden, violent jerk, splashing liquid over his knuckles. The crowd of executives parted. I walked into the VIP circle, wearing a bespoke floor-length backless gown of midnight black velvet that hugged every curve of my newly toned silhouette. A single strand of rare Tahitian black pearls rested against my collarbone. My hair was swept into a flawless updo, highlighting my high cheekbones and bold, crimson-painted lips. I looked younger, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous than the exhausted woman who had flipped a dining table 5 days ago. Arthur Sterling's eyes widened in genuine admiration. Ah, Mrs. Miller. We were just speaking of you. What a stunning entrance. Mark stared at me as if a demon had materialized from the floorboards. His face was gray, sweat beaded across his upper lip. Janice. What are you doing here? Where is your mother? Mom is currently at home with the sheriff's department, darling, I said, smiling warmly as I extended a gloved hand to Arthur Sterling. Mr. Sterling, it is a pleasure. I've read your fund's white paper on ethical corporate governance. Truly inspiring work. The pleasure is all mine, Janice, Arthur smiled, kissing the back of my hand. Mark was just telling us how instrumental you've been to the firm's strategic foundations. Oh, more than you know, I replied, tilting my head toward Mark, whose hands were shaking so violently he had to set his glass down on a passing waiter's tray. Just then, the grand chime sounded through the ballroom. The master of ceremonies took the stage, his voice booming through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed partners and honored guests, please take your seats. We will now begin our keynote presentation, followed by the formal signing of the Series B partnership between Miller Logistics and Vanguard Capital. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. Mark grabbed my elbow with a desperate, crushing grip, his voice a frantic, strangled hiss in my ear. Janice, I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but if you ruin this deal, I will destroy you. Do you hear me? I will. Take Timmy, I will take everything. I pulled my arm from his grip with a single, contemptuous flick of my wrist. Mark, I whispered, leaning close enough that he could smell my jasmine perfume. Look at the big screen. On the 60-foot high-definition projection screen at the front of the stage, the corporate presentation began. The opening slide displayed the Miller Logistics logo, accompanied by swelling orchestral music. Miller Logistics, built on trust, integrity, and family. Then the music abruptly cut out with a sharp, digital screech. The screen flickered. A new video file initialized, titled exhibit_A_October_12_master_bedroom.mp4. The ballroom went completely, suffocatingly quiet. High definition, crystal clear 1080p footage appeared on the 60-foot screen. There was Mark Miller, naked from the waist up, rolling across my white bed with Sarah, whose face was clearly visible under the afternoon sunlight pouring through the window. Mark, tell me, who do you like better, me or Janice? Sarah's high-pitched moan echoed through the 400-seat ballroom through the state-of-the-art Bose surround sound system. You of course, baby. Mark's recorded voice boomed with terrifying clarity. Your sister's like a dead fish in bed. You're way more fun. Gasps of horror and shock erupted across the tables. Several women in the front row dropped their wine glasses. Men choked on their cigars. Mark's knees gave out. He grabbed the edge of the nearest banquet table, knocking over a floral centerpiece, his eyes wide with absolute, unadulterated madness. Turn it off. Turn it off. Someone pull the plug. The technicians at the AV booth, who had been legally served with an emergency court preservation order, and were currently supervised by Victoria Vance's associates, didn't move a muscle. The video cut to the second clip. Exhibit_B_October_15_Delaware_LLC_conspiracy.mp4. The dark living room. Mark, Sarah, and Mom whispering around the coffee table. Mom's voice rang through the hall. Once we have her placed in the 72-hour observation hold, Mark can file for emergency temporary conservatorship, remove her name from the house deed, finalize the Delaware property title. Mark's voice, all right. We call the transport service tomorrow at noon. Then the screen transitioned to a clean clinical financial ledger prepared by the State Board of Forensic Accountants. Miller Logistics, unauthorized diversion of funds. $480,000 transferred to Golden Horizon Holdings LLC, sole member, Sarah Carter. $1.2 million in undisclosed commercial debt leveraged against the corporate treasury. Tax evasion and fraudulent conveyance documentation currently submitted to the Department of Justice. The lights in the ballroom snapped back on. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Arthur Sterling stood up slowly from his seat. He looked at Mark Miller, who was kneeling on the carpet, hyperventilating, his tuxedo drenched in sweat. Arthur didn't say a single word. He unbuttoned his jacket, took the formal partnership contract resting on his table, tore it cleanly in half, and dropped the pieces onto Mark's head. Security, Arthur said, his voice flat with profound disgust. Remove this creature from the building, and call the United States Attorney's Office. Flashbulbs began popping in a blinding, chaotic frenzy. Reporters from the Financial Chronicle, the City Daily, and every local business outlet swarmed the stage, their cameras clicking furiously, capturing every angle of Mark Miller's complete, public annihilation. I stood 5 feet away, perfectly composed under the flashing lights, watching. The man who had frozen my credit cards, called me a frumpy hag, and plotted to lock me in an asylum crawl through his own vomit on the carpet. I reached down, picked up my black evening clutch, and walked toward the grand exit. As I passed him, Mark looked up, tears and snot streaming down his face, his trembling hand reaching for the hem of my velvet gown. Janice, please. Janice, baby. They're going to arrest me. You have to help me. Think of Timmy. I stopped, looked down at his reaching fingers, and stepped back just far enough that his hand grabbed only empty air. I am thinking of Timmy, I said, my voice sweet, calm, and final. I left him with his new mommy. 6 months later, the court proceedings had moved with the swift, brutal efficiency of a guillotine. Because of the overwhelming digital evidence, the forensic accounting trails, and the attempted unlawful medical imprisonment, the family court judge had executed a summary judgment in my favor. The marital residence was awarded to me entirely, which I promptly sold to an international developer for $2.4 million in cash. The luxury condominium in Delaware was seized by the court, liquidated to satisfy Mark's fraudulent conveyance debts, and the proceeds transferred directly into my private trust. Mark's company collapsed within 48 hours of the gala. The board of directors stripped him of his CEO title, filed a $20 million civil lawsuit for corporate embezzlement, and the Department of Justice indicted him on 3 counts of wire fraud and tax evasion. He was currently out on bail, living in a dilapidated, 1-bedroom basement apartment on the outskirts of the industrial district, working as a night shift logistics dispatcher for minimum wage to pay off his mounting legal fees. Sarah's fate was even more poetic. When the money vanished, the delicate, grief-stricken widow vanished with it. The moment the Delaware condo was seized and Mark's bank accounts were frozen, Sarah realized she was shackled to a bankrupt, disgraced felon with a 6-year-old child. She packed her bags in the middle of the night, drained Mom's personal savings account of the remaining $12,000, and fled the state with an older, wealthy truck stop owner she had met online. She left Timmy behind in the basement apartment with a sticky note on the counter. "He's your responsibility now." As for Mom, when Sarah stole her life savings and vanished, Mom suffered a severe hypertensive stroke. She survived, but the right side of her body was permanently paralyzed, and her speech was reduced to slurred, broken murmurs. She was placed in a state-run nursing facility, the cheapest tier available, paid for by her meager government pension. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I visited the facility once. The room smelled of bleach, boiled cabbage, and old linoleum. Mom sat in a generic wheelchair by the frosted window, a faded hospital blanket over her knees, her gray hair thin and unwashed. When she saw me walk through the door, wearing a tailored camel cashmere coat, carrying a fresh leather handbag from my own new design line, her bloodshot eyes filled with desperate, terrified tears. "Jais," she slurred, her left hand clawing at the armrest, trying to lean forward. "Jan, baby, help. I'm taking home." I stood 3 feet away from her chair. I didn't sit down. I didn't take off my gloves. "Do you remember what you told me in the kitchen, Mom?" I asked, my voice calm, smooth as glass. "You told me that Sarah came to bring blessings, and that I was a curse who almost killed you on the operating table." Tears streamed down the paralyzed half of her face, pooling in the wrinkles around her mouth. She shook her head frantically, mumbling broken, incomprehensible apologies. "You gave Sarah your love, your money, your pride, and your protection," I said, looking out the rain-streaked window. "And in return, she took your savings, stole your jewelry, and left you here." I looked back down at her. "I was the daughter who would have held your hand until your last breath. I would have paid for the finest private nurses, the best doctors, the warmest room in the city. But you threw me away for a thief." "Jan, please," she sobbed, her good hand reaching out, trembling in the cold air. "Forgive, Mom." "I do forgive you," I said softly, stepping back toward the door. "Because forgiving you means I never have to think about you again." I turned on my heel and walked down the long, fluorescent-lit corridor, her muffled, agonizing wails fading behind the heavy fire doors. 1 year later, the Mediterranean sun was warm and golden over the cliffs of Positano. The terrace of my cliffside villa overlooked a sea of liquid sapphire, dotted with white yachts and fishing boats returning to harbor. The air was fragrant with blooming jasmine, sea salt, and fresh espresso. My laptop was open on the iron bistro table, displaying the latest quarterly report from Janice Vance Designs, my new architectural consulting firm. We had just signed a contract to renovate 3 boutique hotels along the Amalfi Coast. My phone rang. It was an international call from an unlisted domestic number. I answered, setting it on speakerphone while pouring myself a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. "Hello, Mommy." The voice on the other end was small, raspy, and trembling. It was Timmy. "Mommy, is that you?" The boy began to cry, his voice cracking with the frantic, terrified desperation of an abandoned child. "Daddy is at work. There's no food in the fridge. The power got cut off yesterday because Daddy couldn't pay the bill. Mommy, my shoes have holes in them. My feet hurt so bad." I took a slow sip of my juice, listening to the waves crash against the rocks. 300 feet below. "Aunt Sarah left," Timmy sobbed, his words tumbling out between hiccups. "She took my iPad, she took my toys, and she called me a worthless brat. Mommy, sorry. I'm sorry I called you ugly. I'm sorry I said I hated you. Please come home. Please come pick me up. I want to be your good boy. I promise I'll eat all my vegetables. Mommy, please." Then Mark's hoarse, broken voice came through the receiver, having snatched the phone from the boy's hands. "Janice. Janice, for God's sake, listen to me," Mark croaked, sounding like an old dying man. "I'm working 80 hours a week at the depot. I can barely afford the rent on this basement. Timmy has asthma, and I can't afford his inhalers. Janice, I know I was a monster. I know I destroyed everything. But he's your blood. You carried him for 9 months. How can your heart be this hard? Just send $10,000. Just enough to get him through the winter. Please, Janice. I'm begging you on my knees. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the warm Italian breeze dance across my bare shoulders, playing with the strands of my hair. I looked down at the diamond tennis bracelet on my wrist, glittering beneath the brilliant Mediterranean sun. Mark, I said, my voice melodic, light, and completely detached from their suffering. Janice, you're there. Thank God. When Sarah wanted your seed, you told me that family always shares, I said. Smoothly. You told me that a real wife should be generous with things she's about to throw away. Mark choked on the other end of the line. Janice, that was. I was very generous, Mark. I smiled into the blue sky. I gave her my husband. I gave her my house, and I gave her my son. Mommy. No. Mommy, please. Timmy's distant scream echoed through the receiver. You have each other now, I concluded, my finger hovering over the red button. Build your perfect family. Click. I blocked the number. Then, I went into the phone settings, deactivated the SIM card entirely, pulled the tiny plastic chip from the tray, and dropped it into my glass of sparkling water. The bubbles fizzed around the chip for 3 seconds before it sank to the bottom, silent and dead. I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked to the edge of the terrace, opening my arms to the vast, endless horizon of the sea. The sun was warm, the sky was clear, and for the first time in my life, the air belonged entirely to me.